Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. Today we're going to be discussing the final round, the 11th round of the UCI Cyclocross World Cup, which took place in Hoogerheide. With me to discuss that after being on the ground with me for the first time this season, Issam. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for pointing it out, and it's a pleasure being here, and hopefully I have now more insight than I normally would have, because normally it's just the broadcast, and now, I was on the ground, so it should be way, way better from my side.
What's your insight on wearing white shoes to cyclocross?
I think it's not the smartest of decisions.
Well, with or without white shoes, we both made it back from Hoogerheide, and I think we can be quite happy that we didn't record quite after, because if we did, our podcast would have been outdated super quickly. As I came back and was eating my dinner, big bombshell news, Wout van Aert races the World Championships. Well, I guess I need to take back some words of the past couple of weeks in which I said there was no way that he was going to do this. I was wrong. He is racing the World Championships. I personally don't really think this changes all too much. There's a couple of different versions of the story going around. One that he just made up his mind after Maasmechelen and thought he should do it. If I read between the lines of everything and what the Belgian national team coach said, I don't think that's the full version. It sounds a lot to me like he came into this season not knowing where he would be following that injury, not knowing how good his form would be compared to the rest. But that if his form was good, they always considered racing the World Championships. His form was solid, and if you listen to what the Belgian national team coach said, he said that they had contact after Dendermonde, the end of his first block of racing, and that he sensed that Van Aert was considering racing the World Championships. Visma is not a team that makes this program and then throws it all out of the window just overnight. I think they made the final decision today, but that this was going on longer. Patrick, one of the people who's been on this podcast a couple of times, he is our photographer. He listened to the interview from Benidorm last week and sent me, I don't think this makes a lot of sense. He's talking about freshness building up in the coming weeks. Why would he peak for Maasmechelen? He's definitely building up some freshness towards the Worlds, especially considering the fact that that 9th slot on the Worlds team was open. At the end of the day, that 9th spot was an indicator. I didn't think it was, and I was wrong in that observation. Nevertheless, I don't really think that the team has been lying to us that much. Van Aert did not do many cross-specific trainings. He is rusty on the cross bike. They just didn't want the media in Belgium, especially there, to load with pressure, because there's a poll up on their biggest newspaper, who's going to become world champion. Nearly 40% of respondents think Wout van Aert is going to become world champion next week. That's the pressure you deal with in Belgium. This is all over the news, and by lying and convincing people like me that they were telling the truth, that it was never an option, then they successfully kept most of that pressure away. That's what I think about it. I don't know your take, Issam. After that, we'll for sure dive into the racing.
Yeah, I mean, when I heard about it, I was quite surprised, I have to say, because there was not really any indication, for me at least, that something like that would happen. And it is for him going to be now, he's going to enter the World Championships, I guess, with not that much pressure, because we have seen in certain races already the difference and where he stands in a way, and I think it has been visible. It's going to be interesting right now. I think that it's spicing things up a little bit. Belgium is getting what they wanted. I have called it delusional, and I have called it several other things, but I guess they were right and I was wrong, and we will see how it will play out. But it is, I think, in many ways, it's great that he's going to do it. I think it will draw some more attention. It will bring some more eyeballs towards the racing on the Sunday, and you can't not really say that much negative about it. I think it's in a way it's great to see.
I don't want to make this the preview podcast for the World Championships, but my final thoughts on this are, in most scenarios, Wout van Aert is going to finish second in that race, and that's still a completely fair reason to start the World Championships. He has a very realistic possibility of finishing on the podium. He is the rider who has the best opportunities, the best papers, the best chances to beat Van der Poel, so it makes a lot of sense. But By delaying this announcement, he's avoided the questions, oh, are you going to go to the Worlds? You're going to be beaten by Van der Poel. It's taken away a lot of pressure of the previous races and will also likely downplay somewhat the expectations for the upcoming race. So I think it all makes sense, right? He has a very good opportunity at a medal. He should pretty much be guaranteed a medal on that course, so it makes sense. Let's go to the racing in Hoogerheide, because there we saw another statement victory by Mathieu van der Poel. The world champion attacked early in the first lap and immediately opened a 20-second gap on his first chasers. Van der Poel was never seen again, 1-2 mistakes here and there, but he could cruise in the second half of the race, taking another victory. Much like yesterday, behind it was also not that entertaining, not that tense. Michael van Toerenhout quickly got away for second place. The World Cup winner secured second in the end. With about halfway through the race, Van der Haar broke free from a bigger group of 3-4 riders, and that's a lot of T's in there. Van der Haar took the third spot on the podium, a much needed up for him after that broken chain yesterday. Another impressive ride here, Issam by Van der Poel, and we can talk long and short, oh, he's the favorite for the world title, blah, blah, blah. I just want to take a moment to just look at today's race. He, much like yesterday, was eager to make a statement, where around Christmas we saw him a couple of times be a bit more cautious, not really going all out. Today he really seemed to be in control. He's done a couple of sicko trainings in Spain, 250k ride with 35 kph average, the other 215k ride we also discussed in a previous podcast. He's been putting in the work, his form is improving, and now there really appears to be no stopping him for the riders on the start line today.
Yeah, he was today unstoppable. I think you can compare this a little bit to multi-class racing in motorsports, where you have different categories, different classes, and there's just one particular class that is just faster than the other. I mean, that was just what happened today. We saw one guy that was just way faster than the rest. Because of that, the racing also gets a little bit different behind him, because it's now, I wouldn't say that it is less tactical, because you can still definitely use tactics, and there are still moments that are crucial in the race for them in terms of positioning. I feel that it's just a bit different the way they have to race, because you just immediately get cut off quite some air, and you have to just push from the start. And sometimes, when you don't have that guy that is putting the pace on from lap one, it just changes the dynamics of the race a little bit more, and there's just more of those moments in the race in which the pace drops a little bit and some riders can come back and all that. And I think that was just today never really the case. It was, I wouldn't say full, completely full gas till the finish line, but there wasn't really much to think about for the riders behind. So, yeah, Van der Poel is at the moment better than the rest, and we have said that 1,000 times, so I don't think we have to say that again. But behind, I think Van Toerenhout had today a very good day, and I think he chose his moment well. He got that opportunity, and he was able to maintain the gap, extend that gap a little bit, and that was it. He was able to secure second place, winner of the World Cup. I think that is something that I wouldn't have expected if you would have told me before the World Cup that he was going to be the winner in the end. I think that's a bit of a surprise, so it's great to see that he was able to pull it off. And Van der Haar, seems like when we're going to Hoogerheide, or at least Dutch soil, at times he can find a very good rhythm, and today he was surprisingly good, I have to say, and it's great to see that he was able to pull it off, get on the podium, and it tells us maybe a little bit more about his form currently and what we maybe can expect in Liévin. But that is always how we think about results right now going towards the World Championships.
So about Van Toerenhout and his overall World Cup win, he hit form right in time for this series. He was already kicked out of the other series, not in contention anymore. The start of December was the start of Van Toerenhout's resurge, his end of the rumors. Is he too old? Is he washed up? He turned it around, did very well. Today he profited from the fact that Van der Poel set such an obliterating pace in the first few laps. 8:01, 7:59, 7:57, super quick times. It completely killed a bunch of riders in the back. when Van Toerenhout got away, you could see that Nieuwenhuis had nothing on the pavement. They all just looked at each other and they were happy to kind of take a breather, just take a bit of a rest. In the rest of the race, Van Toerenhout was not that much faster. He just had more left at that moment, which just showed he was stronger. The course was a bit more muddy than in previous years, which made it an even more horsepower circuit than it already is. This is not a technical course at all. There's very few technical features. The features were that draggy climb, which was a run, the barriers, the up and down, the mud. It was easier than when the junior men raced, but it just came down to the raw watts. So in that regard, it's not really a surprise that we see the big engines up front. Van Toerenhout, Aerts, Viseuren, Verstringen, Nieuwenhuis was up there. Mostly the names we saw up there yesterday. Just yesterday, Van der Haar was already up there, but had that broken chain. Today he didn't have that and chained it together in the final few laps to secure that third podium spot. It's an up. If we talk about his form a bit more in the context of recent weeks, he had that knee injury which he obtained in Gavere, which was a really good race. I recall in Gavere we were talking, okay, he seems to have come back quite well from Spain. From there on, it went downwards a bit. He, with that knee, struggled. But I did point out that at the national championships, he looked very good for how tough that course was. We discussed in Benidorm, he looked good. He's peaking towards those world championships, and yes, every result is automatically related to that big event there. And he should be considered a podium contender. The course is expected to be very muddy. As long as it's not too much running, it looks like he'll be fine. He'll probably be more of an outside shot, but nevertheless, he's doing quite good. I, however, wonder, Issam, what you think about Thibaut Nys. He was tipped heavily. There were a lot of Belgians at the circuit talking about the circulations in the Belgian papers. Thibaut Nys is the only one who can potentially battle Mathieu van der Poel. He should have a good shot. His form has been good. That win in Benidorm. There was a story about the illness, that it wasn't really an illness, is what his dad said yesterday. Turns out he felt very bad today. He said he felt completely deflated during the pre-ride, felt the same during the race, and then just decided to withdraw from the race. His comments, or at least alleged comments, I should say, the ones that are written in the Belgian papers, are that he is doubting about his participation at the World Championships. A bit more nuance there. This is what he would have said directly after the race. Nys' entourage says that at the moment they're not completely considering it. We'll just figure it out throughout the week, considering how he feels.
I don't think that he, after one bad race, should now all of a sudden change plans and not go to the Worlds. I think that he should just accept the fact that he did it, excuse me for my language, but he shit the bed. That's basically what happened. His start was not great and never really got into it. And if that is due to not having good legs or whatever, I don't know. But yeah, it's the situation that he has to deal with, and he has to now try and recover a little bit and do some training rides, and that's it. Then the Worlds is already there, and you have to just hope that the legs will be a little bit better in Liévin. And I think that is, you shouldn't be too pessimistic about the championships. I think you should just do it. Even though you don't have the greatest of legs, don't put yourself in a position, because it almost feels like he has big expectations, and I don't think he actually should have that. In a way, I can understand it, obviously, but I feel like that result in Benidorm put quite some unrealistic expectations on Nys. I feel that it was just they were talking about a duel against Van der Poel, and that he was going to challenge him, and that it was going to be that he might be able to actually beat him. And I think that those are just things that came out after that Benidorm race, in which I think that for Nys, I don't know how he dealt with that, but it could have had an influence on him. And, he should just accept the fact that it was a bad race and move on and see what happens next week. I think if it's not something physically in the sense that it's, illness or whatever, I think you should just be cleared to race if it's no injury. Bad legs is something you can have every week, and sometimes the week after it's way better.
We've spoken a bit this weekend about not overreacting, and that certainly seems like an overreaction in the heat of the moment. He isn't the only rider that is feeling ill at the moment. Zweek did not finish with illness. Niels van der Putte finished more than 5 minutes down. He's been recovering from an illness. It's hard in this time of the season, right? You're balancing between top form, that means you're on your most vulnerable moment. So it's very easy to get sick. Your immune system is down a bit. And it's unfortunate. Somebody like Van der Putte can definitely do better than 23rd today. Yesterday he also had a DNS because of that illness, recovering from it. So, yeah, it's tough in this phase of the season. These are just two of the bigger names, but there were more riders that didn't start today. For instance, Eva Holmgren missed this entire weekend with illness. So that's very unfortunate. If you look at the entire top 10 then, behind Van der Poel, Van Toerenhout and Van der Haar, we find Aerts ahead of Viseuren, Iserbyt, Verstringen in 7th, ahead of Nieuwenhuis in 8th, who fell back after a crash. Adams was 9th with Kamp in 10th. Very briefly on Iserbyt, he had, I think, a solid race, kind of following a pretty projectable trajectory by now. Not really great in the opening phase of the race. His first lap, his start was quite explosive, but after that, he kind of settled into pace, moved back up, was on course for 4th, or at least in a battle for that position, crashed. Solid outing for him on a course that doesn't really suit him. Probably after yesterday, didn't really bother anymore after that puncture. Now, two riders here, Issam. How would you feel if you are Jens Adams? You'd give it your absolute everything, knowing that today's race will most likely determine your world selection or not. You finish 9th in a World Cup. Wout van Aert. He's racing. Shoot, there goes my shot.
I feel a little bit bad for him, to be honest. I think that it would have been a little bit fair if he was informed about the situation, because I feel that it looked like he was not aware of the possibility. He should have been told, because if you look how he was racing today, it seems like he was racing with a mission. You know, he was racing with the idea of, if I have a good finish here, I put, the final nail in the coffin. I'm going to be able to project myself as the 9th rider that is going to Liévin. And it's not really fair to him that he was not aware of the situation to that extent, because I feel that if he was told about the situation, I don't actually think that he would have spilled the beans and leaked the information. Obviously, there is a risk if he was told, but I don't think he would have. And there are certain things, obviously, with the Van Aert announcement that were not, in which I would say, great. I think, especially if you look at Maasmechelen yesterday, he could have said that he was considering it, or at least that there was an idea of maybe doing the Worlds, and not really saying, okay, this is my last race, I don't see you from here on till the road, and then later on you say, well, Worlds. I think that it's just that wasn't the nicest of things, and I think for Adams, I feel for him, but he can be, he gave it his all. He had a very good race. He was up there with Viseuren, Verstringen and Toon Aerts for quite some time in the race, and I think that he can be happy with his result in the end. And it is what it is. Things can happen. Things could still happen. I don't know if he's going to be the first reserve.
Yes.
Yeah, he is. Okay, well then in that case he's probably going to wish a lot of unfortunate things to others. I don't think so, but if something happens to someone, we have talked about illness, it could play up, then he might have a shot. But it's a bit unfortunate for him, but it is what it is.
For Adams, it wouldn't have mattered if Van Aert had said something yesterday. They probably should have informed him, and yes, it could have leaked. I don't think it's that likely that Adams does that. That's not who Jens Adams is. It's probably a very disappointing moment for him. I can't imagine it being something else. And the reason why Van Aert didn't say anything yesterday post-race is because all the journalists were there and they would have flooded him. He would probably still be answering questions there. That's how it goes. So I understand that. If you make the call to wait as long as possible, this is it. It's a downside for Adams. On the other hand, he's also a professional athlete and he can only understand this decision. He has not been better than Van Aert. He has not been better than any of the riders that have been selected. You can make the case, well, what about the ones that are ill now? Yes, but that's why he's first reserve, right? He is in contention to move up. Kamp with a 10th place today probably delivered the best ride of his season. This result meant that he did not meet Dutch selection criteria for Worlds. That was to top 12 places, but the national team coach already announced before that he was very much considering bringing Kamp because he had 13th places, a solid 5th place at the Dutch Nationals after a mechanical in the opening lap. With this 10th place now, he further solidified his position and he has been named to the Dutch Worlds team. Then a final mention here on the men's side. 12th place went to Fabien Dubé from Total. It was a pleasant surprise to see him so far up the pecking order. Let's move to the women's race then. Issam, I feel like we were watching a light version of yesterday's race on repeat with a few different riders at the front of the race. Brandt was not the fastest out of the start, but managed to move up into her position, got away with Buck Pieterse. Buck Pieterse crashed, and from there on Brandt went on to take victory. Vos rode very consistently, taking second, with Pieterse taking third. Well, why is it a repeat of yesterday? What did we see? We saw Pieterse and Van Empel make mistakes, both crashed a number of times. Pieterse by taking more risks, Van Empel again looking to go a bit cautious on those sections. Looked like Van Empel was playing F1 open lobbies, trying to dive bomb into Saint-Devote in that corner there on Vos. That was a near mistake. I know it wasn't their intention. She probably got caught up in a bad rut, but they made mistakes. Vos and Brandt didn't make the mistakes. Today, Brandt could utilize her raw horsepower on the course much more, and therefore was quicker than Vos, taking the victory. It's kind of my take on it.
Most of it, I can agree with it. I think that Vos maybe today got a course which suits her a little less, a bit more running, and that hurt her a little bit. And Brandt was, apart from that mistake on the last lap, was flawless. And that is not really Brandt-esque in a way. Sometimes she has just those moments, but today she was able to put it off without that many mistakes. And I think that's eventually, with also having very good legs, and they were apparent, to be honest, yesterday as well. But I think that yesterday it didn't really all come together. And then when you make mistake after mistake, it's just that also costs energy, and then at a certain point it's just you're never really in a position to make something work out. And I think today she really was in that position, and she was just able to get away from the rest, mainly because the rest behind her was just making mistakes. I think Pieterse was not looking all too bad, to be honest, but just mistake after mistake, that didn't help. Van Empel a bit similar. And yeah, that was kind of where we were looking at. Maasmechelen light, as you stated. I think that's quite a nice description of the race in Hoogerheide.
I waited for today to make this point. I couldn't help but notice, again, something I've pointed out many times. And to not bore people, every time Van Empel has taken a break this season, she came back looking very strong. She started her season strong. After the European Championship, she started strong. After the first training camp, she looked strong. After a short break around Christmas, she looked strong. After the Benidorm training camp, she looked strong. But every single time after that strong opening, there were bad results. Be that the stretch from Ruddervoorde to Overijse, be that the disappointing race in Dublin, be that the horrendous race in Namur, whatever you want. Choose a race. This is again the same scenario as we've seen this season. Van Empel comes back feeling fresh, takes the win in Benidorm, but then can't back it up. The consistency with Van Empel, which we praised her for a lot last year, isn't here as much. Her season isn't bad, and it is very possible that next week she three-peats, her third world title in a row. Don't get me wrong, completely still on the cards. Today she just didn't look to have it, and that was not only due to those mistakes she made and that crash. I noticed that she didn't have the power, she didn't have the explosiveness she normally races with. That can be tiredness, and it's fine to have tiredness now. She probably did hard training. She did actually, she was on the same flight back from Spain as me, and I heard them talk about their training and that they'd done quite a bit and that they felt a bit tired. Didn't really hear much of the details, which is also not necessary, but it also shouldn't come as a surprise. I'm not telling anything special here. Almost all riders train hard the weekend or the week between the Benidorm and Maasmechelen Hoogerheide weekends. This is the moment that you create your foundation for next week. With Van Empel, I question what does this mean for her mental state? How confident is she coming into next week? From Peter's side, I know it. She made those mistakes. She needs to avoid them next week. She says, I need a really good day and then I can become world champion. That's kind of how everybody feels. If you have the legs, you can win. Brandt is coming in super confident after a great season. Vos is coming in confident. I don't know how that is with Van Empel. We're in an intriguing situation. Today, as said, it just came down to a lot of power. And then again, the mistakes. Vos was solid like yesterday, didn't make many mistakes, seems to be in good form now. Peters and Van Empel could perhaps have matched Vos, but they made too many mistakes. And if you're evenly matched, those few small slits, the Schwalbe as you called it, those can make the mistake.
Yeah, I wanted to go for the VAR, to be honest, when Peters had that tumble, to be honest. I didn't know if it was a penalty or not, so I had to check. But no, I think that's for...
No era penal. No era penal.
No era penal. No, but, I think with Peters, it was... For her, at least, it should be a bit frustrating because I think that she also feels that the legs are good and there is a good base form. It's just at times messy and not being able to... there are two, 3 good laps and then a moment. And then you have to kind of pick it up again. And it's hard because you're completely out of rhythm and you have to be as fast as possible trying to get back into that rhythm. And that's sometimes very difficult. So I think she compromised her race there. Nevertheless, it still looked quite decent. And she's still going to be entering that World Championships as one of the favorites. I wouldn't say main favorite, but definitely one to... take in consideration for a podium, if not the rainbow stripes. And I have to say, we are entering this women's championship probably quite an open one again. And that is, to be honest, in a way also a nice side to have, because I feel that it is, after Van Empel, the way she dominated, I think it's nice to see that we are 1 week before the World Championships and we have question marks. We have a Van Empel that is maybe, we don't know where she's at and what is the confidence going to be in entering this week. We have a Petersen that also isn't really sure what is going to happen. Brandt, full of confidence, I guess, but we don't know. She has been beaten before this season. So it's nice to see, and Vos is, I guess, only smiling at this point because this weekend it has been a mental boost, and it reminds me of what you were saying about Vos. I think last year it was where she was just able the last weekend to really be up there, but unfortunately was not really able to show that during the World Championships.
Can I, before I talk about Vos, just take a moment to, regardless of what the outcome of the Worlds is, yes, it's going to be a more open race, but Brandt, 35 years old, 8 wins this season, rode pretty much every single race, never finished off the podium. We need to take our hats off because this is an all-time season she's delivering. It is so good, so consistent. I don't feel I've put enough emphasis on how good her season has been. Vos looked fine today. She didn't have the power to match Brandt. She's always good towards the big events. We've seen that on the road, on the mountain bike. I still can't get over her performance at the Tokyo Olympics on the mountain bike. That was something special. I put her in the top 10 prediction, which was kind of a long shot for 8th place. And then she nearly won a medal. Okay, maybe not nearly, but you get what I mean. Her performance was great there. And she's doing well now. It would be really nice to see that Hungarian flag go up on the podium in Louvain. Finally putting an end to... I don't know, I feel the last time there was a non-Dutch rider on the world's podium was Sanne Kant. Or, yeah, probably the world title of Sanne Kant. I feel after that we've only had full Dutch podium lockouts. It's exciting, it's entertaining. If we look at the entire top 10, Issam, we find that behind Brandt, Vos, Petersen, Van Empel, Alvarado finished 5th. Kind of the place where we've seen her a bunch in recent weeks. Casasola finished 7th, just behind Zoe Backstedt. Inger van der Heijden was 8th, ahead of Amandine Foucounet and Isabella Holmgren in 10th. I would like to ask you about Isabella Holmgren here. I think for the other riders, it's a bit more straightforward. Backstedt didn't have the legs she had yesterday. She's not usually super great at replicating 2 good results in a weekend. Foucounet found a course that's good for her. What did you think about Holmgren?
Good. She's someone that seems to be needing a little bit time to get into a race compared to others. But I felt that it was again today. She had one like very good lap. I think it was the third lap, and then from there on it was a bit slower again. But it was really good. I think that it is. You can just see that today was a course. The circumstances and the way it was definitely suited her well, and it's going to be interesting to see what she can do next week. I think that if you look at how her season has been going so far, it is definitely very positive. She will need another season to really build more and get better and get it more experience, I guess, and also just the power will probably be a little bit higher, and just small things that will get better. And I think then when she's able to get that going and the experience as well, I think that it is potentially someone that could be able to be racing more up front. But I think overall she can be, today was a very good outing. I think that it is, if you look at how she entered the European campaign in a way and where she is right now, you could see that it is a good progression overall towards the World Championships, which of course I think she definitely eyes to have a very good result there.
With Bella Holmgren, the improvement can come on the technical aspect, not necessarily the cornering, but more the downhills. She struggled a lot with them in Hulst. It's not her priority, however. She's focusing more on the road, trying to keep the mountain bike spirit going. Her power will likely help her improve, and that's why these courses here and the World's course last year, where she finished 4th in the U23 race, were very good for her. Luckily for her, we are getting a likely similar course next week, so that should be interesting to follow. Just a few final notions. DNF for Mary Schreiber today. She crashed, seemed to have hurt her hip. Marianne Vos also a DNF after a crash. She has some minor injuries, should likely be able to race the Worlds, but a decision will be made later this week. Then Issam, we were also attending the youth races today. The men U23 race, I was thinking / hoping / coping that Del Grosso would take it easy. He didn't. He took off in the first lap, was never seen again, took a tumble on the barriers, didn't hinder him. He also decided to celebrate by taking his shoe off from under his overshoe and doing a phone call with it. None of it could bother him. He took the win. Second place was highly contested. There was a group of some 5-6 riders fighting for that position. Ultimately, in the final lap, Sparfel and Vietzi, both first years, rode away, with Sparfel beating Vietzi to the line. We've covered Del Grosso extensively this season already, and you saw him in action now. You probably get a bit more context from what I've been saying this season, that he just rides these races the way he wants.
I think in terms of the junior categories, I think he is definitely the least surprising out of them all, I guess, because I have seen him already with the elites in the broadcast quite well. And I think, also today you can just see, he crashes on the barriers, and then you would think, okay, well, he has this lead of, what was it? I think at that point it was 30 seconds or something. You're not going to jump the barriers because it's just a risk and you don't need to prove anything, and it's like still 2 laps to go or so. Comes to the barriers, jumps them. And that's just that typical of Del Grosso. He's someone that, does it his way, and he took it quite easy in the first lap, but they almost were not really able to follow him. And then at that point, he decided that it was maybe time to put a little bit more pressure on, and that was all it was. And I think behind him, we had a great battle because Sparfel definitely looked very strong in the beginning, struggled maybe a little bit, and I think at a certain point it looked like we were probably going to have a Belgian rider on the podium. And then Vietzi found something and was able to get himself on that podium spot, and Sparfel as well had a very good last lap and was able to hold on to second. And I think behind Del Grosso, it is getting more and more interesting towards the World Championships in terms of who can get on the podium, because what looked like it was going to be a Jente Michels almost certain second place. I mean, Michels today in 6th, and he didn't look good. He was not really able to put a mark on this race, made some mistakes, and it's almost like Michels in the elites races, but this wasn't really good. And I think if you are a Michels fan, you should be a little bit worried.
What indeed at the beginning of the season looked to be like Del Grosso, Michels, and Haverings up there has changed. We noted that last week. The funny thing with Sparvel and Vietzi being the ones up there is that both these riders need to be calmed down so much. The French coaches could not put enough emphasis. Calm.
Tranquille.
Calm. Tranquilo ben. That's all they kept saying. They couldn't put enough emphasis on it. Vietzi, similar scenario, similar case. I didn't hear the Italians that much. They were certainly up there encouraging Vietzi. He was eager to leave his mark. It's almost because he was coming from behind so much this season that he was confused when in the second lap he was racing for second place. The group came to a halt on the pavement and he just took the lead and started pacing. Quickly, he also realized that that wasn't the smartest tactic, so they sat in, let Michels do most of the work. And as you said, Michels didn't look good, not the first time. He crashed in the first lap, silly crash, needed to chase. Came back to the second place group, rode in second for a while, but couldn't keep that second place for the race. He fell back even further, leaving me to guess, well, what will Michels do next week? Sure, Michels is still a podium contender. He hasn't just shown it the past couple of weeks. At some point, we also need to wonder, well, where is Jente Michels in the conversation? Sure, he's going by name, he's going by reputation, he's going by results earlier in the season. At some point, you're also just as good as your last race. And his last races of Michels, they've not been that good. He took a break, much needed break after Baal. Wasn't good at the Belgian U23 championships. Was okay in Benidorm. Also not that special as we've seen him early in the season. And he didn't deliver in Hoogerheide today. So, as you said, Issam, it's wide open. There's going to be many of those other riders that were in that mix fighting there next week. It should be very entertaining. Courses, I've mentioned a couple of times, big talent. Dox gets it together now. Still, maybe somewhat disappointing result considering the potential we know he has. Then 6th place went to Michels, ahead of De Bruyker, Van den Berg and Van der Einde. 10th place went to Henry Koot. That's probably the standout result in this category.
Yeah, I think with Henry, it was interesting to see because he was at a certain point, he was like around 15th, 16th, 17th even, I think, and he was able to cut through the field, and it looked very good. And at a certain point, he was in the fight for 10th, and it looked like the two Dutch riders with KSO and Haverings, they were up there as well, and tactically, it was in front of them in the last lap, and then they tried to get ahead of him, and then eventually he was still able to pull that off and finish in the top 10. And it's just a bit more significant if you finish 10th instead of 11th. It just adds a little bit more value to it. So it was good to see that he was able to pull that off, and I think he has that potential, I guess, for being in the top 10 of a World Cup in the under 23 category. And I think that is something that he can take with him to the Worlds, and you never know what can happen there. A top 10 there would definitely be for him, I think, a very solid result.
A more than solid result for a first year like him. You can't put enough emphasis on the non-linear development he's made. He's progressed really, really nicely. This is another example of that. If he can stay consistent, avoid the mistakes, which has been his fatal flaw this season, then these results are possible. He needed to come from far back. You said indeed he was 17th at some point. That was because his start position wasn't that good. He was, I think, 32nd going into the field, so very good ride by him, but not the ride of the day. The ride of the day came from Barbora Bukowska, the Czech rider. She was involved in a start crash. She was dead last, moved through the field in the first lap, took another tumble, regained connection with the lead of the race again, stormed off, cruised in the final lap, taking victory. It was an overdue victory. I've said it a number of times this season that her lap times have been really good. She just needed to get the starts together. Today, even with the worst start of the season, everything fell into its place for her. She took her first World Cup win. She's a first-year junior. Second place went to May Cabassa, the Dutch rider. We mentioned her last week in Benidorm, getting her first World Cup podium. She seems to be peaking right in time for the World Championship as she powered away from Carrier, who finished third. World Cup rival, winner of the last two races, Lise Revol, finished fifth, feeling the tiredness from a training camp in Spain. Issam, special ride by Bukowska.
Special ride? That was a crazy ride, to be honest, because I was surprised that she was actually the one, because I didn't know that she was actually the one that crashed there in on the start finish straight. But then just before the first lap being completed, in the last corner, I looked to my right, I looked to my left, and there she is laying on the ground. She already made up quite some ground, to be honest. I think she was at that point already almost in the top 10 or very close to being in the top 10. I think she actually was already in the top 10. So she made up ground quite quickly, and she never stopped. It just, lap after lap, she was able to just get closer and closer to the front, and sure, the others were definitely still riding. There was not really a tactical game going on between Carrier and Cabassa and who were up front, and I think that is, it's a very incredible ride. But it was a ride in which, you also saying very correctly, the lap times were there, and it was basically just making sure that it came all together. And despite the fact that it did not come together today, it eventually did after the first lap. And I think that that is something that she probably has to work on. But I'm looking right now at this, and I'm like, sure, she's very young, but if I am a cyclocross team that is desperate of talent, especially on the women's side, I know what I would be doing. I would be looking into signing or trying to put her in a team, or at least supporting her a little bit and see what that will eventually end up being, because she definitely has the talent. She's still in early development, and you don't know how that development will be and the choices that she will make, but it is definitely in my eyes at the moment a big talent. And it was incredible to see her have this ride today when I actually was able to watch. I think it was a great ride overall.
Yeah, she's a first year, but that wouldn't stop me from making a move on her. Juniors get signed by teams all the time, right? She is potential for the road because she has the power. If you're a cross team that wants to make a move, perhaps to combine both, she's also a very good rider because you can refine her skills. You can improve her technical ability. You can improve her starts. So that will help her a lot. She is a big talent. We'll see what next week brings. Pressure is definitely something that can be a bit tricky for her. She's shown quite a lot this season, so let's hope that things come together next week. Cabassa, Carrier, second and third, feel like it just came down to power. Didn't see any mistakes really between those two. A bit of a continuation, what we've seen. Cabassa a bit on the up, Carrier a little bit on the down. They'll both be in contention next week, as will Revol. The French did a big training camp in Spain, just like last year. Their results here in Hoogerheide were not that amazing. They passed me on my ride. They were going very fast, but that was probably due to the fact that I was going quite slow up that climb. Revol was in that group, Dutern was in that group. It's irrelevant that where they were in Spain. They were training just like last year. It doesn't have to mean anything. Géry made a very weak impression here last year, but she became world champion in the end. Yes, it took a bunch of mistakes from Ferguson, but that was the case all season. I wouldn't worry too much if I were Revol or Dutern or Lambert. Desperez didn't even start. So, yeah, it is what it is. We're here. I thought Grossman rode a solid race in fourth place. Cusack and Pelizzotti in 6 and 7, kind of where we've seen them all season. Nico Knoll making a stride back to the top 10 after finally taking some rest. Her first proper rest since racing every single weekend since the start of September, pretty much. It fell kind of into its place. This is pretty much what we've seen all season in this category, I feel. A category where we can't say there's been something we've seen all season is the junior men, because what would be the junior men's category this season without major surprises? Today the surprises were not one or two names in the top 10, we hadn't seen there that much. Today it was the entire podium. Early in the race, a couple of riders got away, all riders that we hadn't really seen that much this season. Filippo Grigolini, we mentioned him in Benidorm, he was in the leading group with his countryman Patrick Pezzo-Rossola. Mats van den Einde was there, Benedict Benz was there, Théophile Vassal was there. Not there were Jumar and Agostinaccio, the two rivals for the overall World Cup, were way down the pecking order. Agostinaccio would eventually finish 19th, whereas Jumar would fight his way back to 4th. Grigolini ate dirt on the barriers. He tried to jump but crashed, leaving three leaders as Vassal got dropped: Benz, Rossola and Van den Einde. Benz, who had paced early in the race, sat in the middle but dropped his watts in the final lap. He opened a 4-second gap with his first attack, lost this lead by a horrible dismount before the steep climb, then just powered away again, taking the win ahead of Van den Einde and Rossola. As said, Jumar finished 4th with Vassal dropping to 5th. This was another case, Issam, where we were watching this and thinking, what is going on? We thought we'd cracked the code. Jumar, Agostinaccio, kind of the riders to keep in mind. Noval Suarez and Hofer, other riders. Suarez wasn't here, Hofer was, but couldn't deliver despite this being a power course. And then we just get different riders at the front. Rossola, he was up front in Benidorm, fell back. Van den Einde, we know he's a powerful rider. Nothing indicated this was coming. Benz, we talked about him being a very powerful rider. He was quite hyped. Also didn't really show it on the power courses this season. But here we are, 1 week before the World Championships. Everything is open again.
Yeah, I made myself believe that he had a top 10 somewhere in a World Cup, but he didn't even have that, to be honest. So it was a surprise. It really was, and I think it's, if there is one example of not getting ahead of ourselves in terms of the weekend before the Worlds, I think it's this one. It's really pointing that out, because I feel that the standards normally should still be applying when we go to Lieven. I think that a Jumar is still going to be one of the main favorites when we go to the World Championships. But this could also mean that a Benedict Benz could be much closer than we thought he would be. And I think that because today was a very good ride. I think he was always up there. He was always somewhat taking the initiative. He was always putting the pressure on, and it was a very deserved winner. And I think that it was an interesting ride. He didn't make that many mistakes. I think it was a very, very solid ride from him. And then it's going to be interesting. And when was the last time that we had a German prospect in the junior categories? I don't know. I can't recall it myself because I just can't. I don't have the memory for that. But yeah, it's great to see that how that podium shaped up today, and it makes zero sense. And we will enter the week of the World Championships with some riders that we have known from the season and that have been somewhat consistent in terms of being able to finish in the top 5. But it is, I would say that this is quite open, and it's going to be arguably the most interesting race of the weekend next weekend.
It's for sure the most open race because none of it makes sense this season. There is no consistency. I agree that over the course of the season, probably the riders that have consistently been able to show some level of performance, like Jumar, like Agostinaccio, like Noval Suarez, those riders should probably be considered the favorites. But with how open this category has been, the list of outsiders and dark horses is so long. There's so many riders. I think we've had like 10, 11, maybe 12 riders on the podium of the World Cups this season. That's nuts. It's nuts. Another rider today that looked very strong was Bazant. He moved through the field quite nicely. He needed to start quite far back. He put in one really fast lap, which was nearly as fast as the opening lap of the race. Kind of paid the price for that in the final 2 laps. It looked okay. I'm probably thinking that Bazant at most can realize a 3rd place considering all the illnesses he's had. But it's looking okay. Vassal today looked okay despite the training camp. Jumar looked good in the second half of the race. He kind of got under steam there, seemed he needed to push through some tiredness. It's interesting. And honestly, Issam, just the final thing here. What do you in general think about the Italians? We've talked a lot about the French system and the French place 4-5-6 today. But what about those Italians? Rossola third, Agostinaccio European champion, Grigolini good last week, was up there until he crashed. Pontoni is doing some things there.
He is, but when I look at the season of Agostinaccio, I don't understand really why he did so many races. Because I think for a junior at least, I think he did 19 races this season. It has been, that I think that has been a little bit too much, and I hope for him that he's not going to catch up in at the Worlds. But going back on the Italians and what they are doing, I think that they also have a very strong structure, and they have been for a couple of years. They have been working very hard on that, and you can definitely see with them that they are, they have to it's not easy work, and it's not always going to be that you're going to have 4 or 5 talents in a category. But I feel that the Italians are somewhat patient with their talent, and also they're trying to give them time. And I feel that it looks quite strong. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can prolong that, because what you sometimes see is that you have federations that are able to put in the effort, but then at a certain time, just the attention kind of slims down, and there are some money issues, and money gets put into other things, and there are other interests, and slowly but surely it somewhat dies out. And we have seen that with several countries, and hopefully it doesn't happen with Italy. I think that they are on a good route, I feel, and if they are able to maintain this, we might be able to see some Italians up front in the next 5 to 10 years, maybe in the elite categories.
The struggle remains to keep them in cross, and this is the same old story. Corvi, Venturelli, two promising Italian junior women that came through, both shifted their attention to the road. Honestly, I can understand it, both, especially Venturelli. Corvi is, I think, also on the mountain bike, but especially Venturelli. She struggled a lot with the technical abilities in cross, etc. So, makes a lot of sense. Nevertheless, that's the thing. They need to be able to stay in the sport for a prolonged career. With Casasola and Vietzi both finding their way to big Belgian teams, I am quite optimistic that this will open pathways and will open the eyes of more riders to consider a career in cross. I'm also hoping here a lot, so fingers crossed. But yeah, with Vietzi and Casasola, they have two riders that are making inroads, that are doing decently, so hopefully that has its effect. I think we kept it relatively short for how much we discussed today. It wasn't the most interesting course in terms of things to analyze. It really came down to raw power today, which explains the shorter episode, but less editing for me. So that's a W because it's a busy week. Newsletters to be written, preview podcasts to be recorded, travels to France to be made, races to be analyzed. Issam, thank you for being here.
Yeah, it is going to be somewhat more busy than the usual weeks, but it's the week in which we can finally anticipate the World Championships, and after that we have the big dip of cyclocross in a way, and the focus then slowly but surely goes onto the road. But we're not there yet. We are still having the eyeballs upon us, and the people are still interested in it, and the World Championships are coming up. So thank you for having me, and I can't wait till we talk more in depth about the World Championships, and eventually we're able to watch and witness the World Championships ourselves this weekend, or the next weekend, obviously.
Thanks to all our listeners for listening. We will be back with a preview podcast this week for all races at the World Championships. Thanks for listening. Goodbye. See you guys soon.